Unlike Plato's Republic, where the ends sought are political rather than spiritual, the motive of a prophetic rabbinic utopia is the spiritual perfection of human society. In the Republic, to be sure, the supreme virtue in the ideal commonwealth is justice, but Plato is chiefly concerned with what will hold the ideal city together. The rabbis, on the other hand, are mainly interested in that ideology which would hold the whole world or the universal state together. The rabbis, on the other hand, are mainly interested in that ideology which would hold the whole world or the universal state together. The ideal behind the Jewish utopia is spiritual and ethical harmony. A Jewish utopia begins where Wells leaves off. It starts with the world as the basis of the new social life. From that viewpoint, the rabbis picture first a scheme of a transvaluation of spiritual, intellectual, and material values, and a complete spiritual transformation. Having laid this foundation of the new ideal order, the Jewish idealists proceed with the rest of their plan and complete the superstructure of their utopia. Hello, my friends. So the quote that I just gave is from a book called The Jewish Utopia by a guy called Higger. And he was a pro-Jewish scholar. And I think his take on the overall political goals of Judaism, political and social goals of Judaism, is spot on in this book. But the real significance of that quote, which I think is pretty damn significant, only occurred to me while I was listening to a debate between Michel Foucault and Noam Chomsky. And what happened in the debate was Chomsky was advocating for anarcho-syndicalism, which would be basically an abolishing the state and removing all of these artificial constraints that Chomsky calls artificial, such as, I'm sure, borders and the idea of national sovereignty. And Foucault, replying to Chomsky's idealization of the anarcho-syndicalist society, Foucault responds that the biggest danger with such idealizations is that political power does not necessarily, or I should say power as a whole, power in general, does not necessarily exert itself through political institutions alone. In the modern world, most people have this illusion, this false impression that power is only really exercised through official state apparatuses, or official state institutions. But what Foucault points out is that where power is often exerted in the strongest way is through institutions that are seemingly non-political. Institutions like academia, institutions like the media, like psychiatry, Foucault likes to point out. And that even if we somehow abolished the state and instituted an anarcho-syndicalist society, that power and the current class, Foucault loves to talk about the classes that actually control power instead of just an abstract abstract structural entity or something. He talks about actual classes. The class that is exerting power today through the political institutions and the extra political institutions that still exert this power, that class could perpetuate its power even without the existence of the state. That the state is not fundamental to power being exerted upon people.
En revanche, une des tâches qui me paraît urgente, immédiate, avant même toute autre chose, c'est celle-ci. On a l'habitude, du moins dans notre société européenne, de considérer que le pouvoir, il est localisé entre les mains du gouvernement et il s'exerce par un certain nombre d'institutions bien particulières qui sont l'administration, en France on appelle ça préfectorale, enfin je ne sais pas comment on dit ailleurs, l'administration, la police, l'armée. On sait que toutes ces institutions-là sont faites pour transmettre les ordres, les faire appliquer et punir les gens qui n'obéissent pas. Mais je crois que le pouvoir politique, il s'exerce encore, il s'exerce en outre, de plus, par l'intermédiaire d'un certain nombre d'institutions qui ont l'air comme ça de n'avoir rien de commun avec le pouvoir politique, qui ont l'air d'en être indépendantes et qui ne le sont pas. On sait bien que l'université, d'une façon générale, tout le système scolaire, qui en apparence est fait simplement pour distribuer le savoir, on sait que cet appareil scolaire est fait pour maintenir au pouvoir une certaine classe sociale et exclure des instruments du pouvoir toute une autre classe sociale. Quelque chose comme la psychiatrie, qui en apparence aussi n'est destinée qu'au bien de l'humanité et à la connaissance des psychiatres, la psychiatrie est encore une certaine manière de faire peser un pouvoir politique sur un groupe social. La justice également. Bon, et il me semble que la tâche politique actuelle dans une société comme la nôtre, c'est de critiquer le jeu des institutions apparemment les plus neutres et les plus indépendantes, de les critiquer, de l'attaquer de telle manière que la violence politique qui s'exerçait obscurément en eux surgisse et pour qu'on puisse lutter contre elle. À vouloir tout de suite, enfin si on cherche tout de suite à donner le profil et la formule de la société future, sans avoir bien fait la critique de tous les rapports de violence politique qui s'exercent dans notre société, on risque de les laisser se reconstituer, même à travers des formes aussi nobles, apparemment aussi pures que celles du syndicalisme anarchiste.
And while I was listening to this, it really struck me how this relates back to the quote that I just read you at the beginning of this video. That quote says that the Jewish strategy, the rabbinic strategy of bringing about the millennium, the great messianic period, end of history, that their strategy is not to control political institutions per se, but to bring about a spiritual transformation, to control the spiritual life, which is to say, the thoughts, the beliefs, the practices, the emotions of the people. That is how the Messianic age will be brought into being. That is how the kingdom of God on earth is going to be brought into being. And that once this spiritual transformation of mankind has taken place, then the superstructure, as the quote says, of the earthly kingdom will be placed upon it, because people will be primed, they'll be ready. The spiritual transformation has to precede this political transformation. It's no longer about some kind of political revolution that will suddenly, overnight, bring things about, bring about a global government or something like that. It's not going to be the case. The global government will only come about once the total spiritual transformation of the majority of mankind has taken place. And that spiritual transformation, like Foucault points out, the control over people, can be effected through non-political institutions. And that sort of felt like an epiphany, where I realized, wow, Zionist Jews like Noam Chomsky can be anarchists and yet at the same time be agents of globalism and agents of the one world, the new world order that is being brought into being. Even as he is pretending to be against centralized state power, his political philosophy is completely compatible with this rabbinic idea. I'm not going to say Jewish anymore, I'm going to say rabbinic. I feel like the YouTube algorithms will pick me up less. But this transformation of society is completely possible within an anarcho-syndicalist system. And in fact, it presupposes, I think that in a lot of ways, Chomsky's system presupposes this spiritual transformation of society as a whole, because he is assuming that the majority of people in the world are going to follow some kind of universal conception of justice, some kind of universal conception of harmony among all people and brotherhood among all people and cooperation over competition and everything else that comes with the totalitarian, communistic, rabbinic world order that is being brought into being. So that felt like a really important idea, because that brings into clarity, it makes it crystal clear how these rabbis can use seemingly any political doctrine to their advantage, that they can control any side of the argument and still wind up with the same basic conclusions of a world system, of a one world system, and a new social order where the traditional values of our ancestors, especially in Europe, but all over the world, are replaced with this new social order that lends itself right into globalism, one world order system. That is basically the reason why it doesn't matter if there's a one world empire right now. They're not trying to make Israel a one world empire, or they're not trying to make the United States the one world empire anymore. The political empire is no longer the main agenda, the main objective in their agenda. The main objective is now the spiritual transformation. That is the main objective. It's no longer political transformation. The spiritual transformation has to happen first. That is the most significant idea that I think I've understood in a while. That really brings it into crystal clarity for me. That's how they can control any side of the argument, because unquestioned and unexamined basis of this that most people already accept. Most people have already been primed to accept this through the media, through their schooling, through their experience at the academic university system, through every possible non-political entity, non-political institution that they control. They have absorbed this idea that justice, fairness, equality, one human race, humanity as a whole, all of these concepts have been put into their head through osmosis. Yeah, that was the sound of osmosis. Right into their brains. Oh, Lord. And that is why someone like Chomsky, or even Molyneux, or Murray Rothbard, or Ludwig von Mises, how these people are radical libertarians, or anarcho-capitalists, or anarcho-syndicalists. And then on the other side, you have like Karl Marx, you have, what was that chick's name? The anarchist socialist woman in Germany, I think. Can't remember. But anyway, the point is they control the far left, the far right, they control the moderate center. All of these political parties and ideologies can be controlled because the political outcome, in a sense, doesn't really matter all that much. Because the real outcome that they're looking for, the important outcome here, is spiritual. It's a spiritual transformation, not a political transformation. The political transformation will come almost naturally once the spiritual transformation has occurred. And then it will be complete. There will be no going back. A political transformation can happen, but as long as the population in general is spiritually traditional and spiritually connected with their ancestors and their ancestral ways, then the political transformation is temporary. There's always the potential for that people to go back, for that people to revolt and return. But once the spiritual transformation is complete, that's going to be a tough one to recover from. That seems way more permanent and everlasting. So, yeah, I recommend you watch that debate. Maybe I'll actually do a video analyzing that whole debate, going through line by line or step by step watching it, because it's that debate between Foucault and Chomsky. It's pretty fascinating, and as much of a degenerate and horrible person Foucault was in his personal life, his intellectual life is interesting, to say the least. He had a lot of intelligent ideas, and I think that he was genuinely an independent thinker. Whereas someone like Chomsky, who is a well-connected Ashkenazi you-know-who, worked at Harvard, at MIT, extremely well-connected. He's certainly an agent of the system, even as much as he pretends to be a dissident. He's a Zionist too. So it's an interesting debate, but the whole point here is that the reason that the political outcomes don't really matter all that much, and that the ruling class can control any and all sides of a political debate, is because what they're really trying to go after is this spiritual transformation, which is the unity of man, unity of mankind, universal justice for all, universal fairness and equality. That is those are the basic tenets of the spiritual transformation they're trying to bring into effect. So, yeah. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching.